Welcome to History Forever, and we invite you to watch a video featuring our new original story, Volodya, Slow Down. The man grimaced. The road ahead was smooth as a ribbon, not a single car in sight, front or back, plenty of room to accelerate, especially since the journey was long, almost 1,000 kilometers. From the moment they set out, Jana had immediately settled in the back seat. "I'll nap a bit, I didn't get enough sleep." Her husband nodded in agreement. She had come home late from work. Her superiors had been reluctant to grant her leave. Imagine such a valuable employee. Volodya had chuckled to himself then, feeling a surge of pride for his wife. And this morning, he'd thought, let her sleep, it's no big deal. He listened to a road trip playlist through his headphones, gazing ahead, calculating that in about 4 hours they could stop for lunch, stretch their stiff legs and backs, and then continue. Perhaps he might even let Jana take the wheel before it got dark, as she wasn't fond of driving at night. Suddenly, his wife's hand, with its immaculately manicured nails, dug into his elbow. "What's wrong?" he asked, surprised, without taking his eyes off the asphalt, but pulling out one earbud. "Stop, I'm telling you, you can't stop here. See the guardrail along the shoulder? Once that ends, then we can pull over." "Don't lecture me on the rules. Turn around," Jana commanded when he finally braked. "Are you crazy, Volodya?" She glared at him in the rearview mirror. "All right, but I don't understand what's gotten into you." The man carefully maneuvered the car into a U-turn on the empty highway and headed back the way they came. "No need to rush. No one's chasing us," Jana said, her eyes scanning the opposite shoulder. Then she declared sharply, "Stop!" Volodya, startled, indeed slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a halt in the middle of the lane. His wife opened the door. "Where are you going?" "I'll just pull onto the shoulder," he tried to reason with her. "You'll pull over without me?" she shouted, then dashed across the road and disappeared beyond the embankment. Damn, what happened over there now? Volodya waited in the car for a while, expecting Jana to return, then parked further from the lane and got out. His wife's head reappeared from the other side. "Where are you?" "Come here," she waved. "Help us." "Us?" the man marveled, thinking Jana had perhaps found a stray dog or some other animal. Oh, her kindness again. He shook his head, wondering how she'd spotted it behind the embankment, and walked towards where she had vanished. Jana had a deep reverence for living creatures. She'd nurse houseplants back to health when they were discarded, still in their pots, due to some oversight. She'd drive dogs and cats she found on the roadside to veterinarians and shelters. Once, a titmouse flew into the radiator grill of their moving car and died there. His wife didn't speak to Volodya for a full week. But I wasn't at fault. He'd spread his hands, trying to appease her anger. But to Jana, it made no difference. She even released mosquitoes from the car. "Easy for you to say. They barely bite you. But I'm actually allergic to their bites," her husband often told her. "Spray yourself with repellent. No need to swat them without reason." And she would begin to explain the food chain, which included those insects. From her accounts, it seemed his swatting mosquitoes with his bare hands would soon lead to a global catastrophe. Reaching the opposite shoulder, Volodya looked down and, gasping, began to descend quickly. Jana was trying to support a large woman in a light-colored headscarf who could barely stand. "What happened? Were you hit by a car?" he asked, out of breath as he ran up. "No, don't be absurd," his wife replied. "She's pregnant, can't you see? She's gone into labor." And indeed, only then did Volodya notice that the large woman's appearance was due to her prominent belly. She was squatting with every step, sliding back down the gravelly incline of the roadside. "Okay, I'll support her. You go get the car." "Immediately," he commanded. Jana nodded without a word and bolted uphill. Her husband couldn't help but admire her. Not every woman her age could gracefully ascend a steep slope. And most importantly, without a single question, she did as he said. This was because, after nearly 20 years of marriage, they had learned to understand each other without words. "All right, let's go." Volodya exhaled, helped the woman to her feet, and supporting her, slowly began to guide her upward. My things are down there on the bicycle," the pregnant woman murmured out of breath as she collapsed onto the back seat of the SUV. "Wow, you're still riding a bicycle in your condition. Volodya exclaimed. No, I was carrying things on it so I wouldn't have to haul them myself, she explained between contractions. Jana gave her husband a meaningful look. Volodya nodded and immediately went back. Not far away, he found a bicycle with a fabric bag tied to it, packed full of belongings. He brought it to the woman. And the bicycle? She asked. Well, I'm sorry. The man spread his hands. The bicycle won't fit in our car. We're going on vacation. The trunk is full. Then forget it. The stranger waved her hand. The main thing is that the things are safe. Okay, we need to find the nearest maternity hospital. Where is it, I wonder? Jana pulled out her phone and checked the map, then answered herself. In Nekrasovka. No. The woman shook her head. They closed that last summer. We need to go to Verkhnie Kolodzy. They have a large hospital with a maternity ward. But that's almost 80 kilometers. I'm afraid we won't make it, Volodya said, shaking his head. You mean we won't arrive in time? We don't have a choice, the woman retorted. Either she gives birth in the car or in the hospital. Either way, we have to go there, so let's go. The weather's good, there aren't many cars. Maybe we'll get lucky. Volodya set the destination on the navigation system and sped off following the arrow. In the back seat, Jana tried to distract the stranger from her contractions by asking questions. My name is Zoya, she replied. I'm from Starokuzminovo. It's a village by the timber road. I felt something wasn't right, so I went to see the paramedic, but she wasn't there. I figured I couldn't wait. I went home, packed my things, loaded them onto the bicycle, and headed towards the highway. I was almost there when I started having contractions. So you walked through the fields? Jana inquired. The interlocutor nodded. Through fields and forest, so it was only 5 kilometers that way, but along the road it would be 12. But couldn't someone have picked you up on the road? Volodya interjected, intently watching the road and the navigator. No. The woman shook her head. The sawmill moved. Hardly anyone drives on the highway now, and there are more people this way. Besides, I thought I still had time. Take off your headscarf, it's hot, Jana suggested, and was quite surprised, though she didn't show it when she heard the answer. No, we're not allowed to. Why would you do that? A doctor asked the couple after Zoya had been taken directly from the car on a stretcher to the delivery room, and looked sternly at the woman. She's a relative, albeit a distant one. You should have kept an eye on her. Your sister, in her condition, hasn't seen a doctor even once. How can that be? What if she had a breech presentation or some other pregnancy complication? It's a good thing everything turned out okay. A healthy baby boy was born, so congratulations on your nephew. 4.5 kilograms. A real strong one. Nephew? Jana was astonished. She couldn't comprehend what she'd heard. Why were they somehow to blame if they had picked up a pregnant woman on the road and brought her to the hospital to give birth? You mean, no? The doctor asked in turn. She said you were her sister, either a cousin or a second cousin. I couldn't quite tell and didn't bother to clarify. She was too distressed. The young doctor smiled. Jana and Volodya exchanged glances, and the woman nodded in agreement. Ah, yes. I just got flustered and stopped thinking clearly. When will she be discharged? Usually, if everything is fine, discharge is planned 3 days after delivery. Your relative is doing perfectly. You can visit her tomorrow, she'll be able to see you, and you can bring her water and fruit any time now. See that window? The medic pointed to a window with a sign reading, Deliveries. Okay, doctor. Thank you. Volodya thanked him. The doctor left and Jana looked at her husband. Don't tell me we're staying here. He shook his head. Well, of course. His wife smiled softly. We can't just abandon my cousin at the maternity hospital. Why did she lie? We'll find out tomorrow when we meet her. For now, let's split up. I'll go to the nearest store for water and fruit and you look for a hotel. I doubt there are any here, honestly. If, by chance, there aren't any, maybe we'll find a kind old lady who'll let us stay the night. I'll wait for you here. With a nod, the woman headed for the exit. Finding lodging in this hole? What a task, Volodya thought as he walked to the car. And where on earth am I supposed to find this old lady? Perhaps at the market? Excuse me, please, where is your market? He asked a passerby. It's over there, turn right, go that way, the man gestured. And then to the traffic light, and left, that way again. He gestured in another direction. "And you'll find it." Volodya decided to try his luck and asked, "Do you have a hotel here?" "Of course, we're a city, even if a small one," the passerby said proudly and started to leave. "Where is it?" Volodya stopped him. "Right there, at the market." "Thank you, my friend," the man said, pleased, and got into his car. Surprisingly, the hotel was quite decent, new and completely empty. "Where is everyone?" Jana asked jokingly when she and her husband arrived at the reception. "It's not the season," the young woman smiled, greeting the clients. "Is there a season?" Volodya asked with genuine surprise. It was hard to imagine anything here that would draw people. No sea, no ancient architecture, and the town itself was on the outskirts of the region. "Well, in April, we have a literary reading for young talents. They come from all over the country, which is why they built such a hotel. It's fully booked. Some people even stay with locals who come often and have made acquaintances. But the rest of the time, it's quiet. Unless, of course, there are guests like you." "Let's consider our vacation begins here, in Verkhnya Kolodzy." Jana laughed as she fell onto the bed in the room. "It's not the sea, of course, but it's still connected to water." Volodya emerged from the bathroom where he'd been washing up and looked at his wife with a smile. He liked that she took everything lightly and with a good dose of humor. Indeed, adventures await where you least expect them. "Congratulations on your nephew, Aunt Jana." Jana propped herself up on one elbow. It's strange, isn't it? Why did she do that? Why didn't she give the doctors her phone number or the coordinates of her relatives? I mean, her actual relatives. No, for some reason she had to present me as her sister, even a second cousin. And we got scolded for it. "The road to hell is paved with good intentions," Volodya said, who liked to impress with aphorisms, quotes, or proverbs when the occasion arose. "What are you saying?" his wife exclaimed indignantly. "I'm sure Zoya will explain everything tomorrow. Give us her relatives' phone numbers. We'll contact them, tell them everything, and go back home." "We'll see," the man smirked skeptically. "Blessed are those who believe. However, I'm plagued by vague doubts." When Zoya emerged to meet her rescuers, they didn't immediately recognize her. She turned out to be about 15 years, or even more, younger than the couple. Without her pregnancy belly, she was surprisingly delicate. Her hair was tied not with a headscarf but with a kerchief made from a baby swaddle. And how could she have carried such a heavy belly, and with a bicycle and a bag 5 kilometers through the forest? Jana marveled, looking at her. "Hello, Zoya. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, thank you," the girl replied shyly. "You helped me a lot, and I'm grateful for yesterday's delivery, too. I was very thirsty after giving birth." "I'm glad everything ended well. Let's inform your relatives where you are so they can pick you up with the baby the day after tomorrow." Zoya's eyes suddenly dimmed, and she turned away, saying, somewhere in the distance, "I don't have any relatives." "None?" Volodya almost jumped in his chair. "No," the girl shrugged. "I'm alone." "And where's the baby's father?" Jana inquired. "I don't know, and he doesn't know where I am." "Business," Volodya drawled and slapped his knee with his palm, realizing their seaside vacation might not happen. "Well, you know your wife. Friends, colleagues, anyone from your life." Zoya shook her head negatively. "And where will you go? We can be informal. You called me sister at the hospital." Jana smiled encouragingly at the girl. "Where will you go when you're discharged? Where did you live before?" "I'm not going back there," Zoya said after a moment's silence. "I have a little money. I'll get a job here in a shop or travel to the regional city." "What shop? What city? Are you out of your mind? You have a newborn son in your arms. Where will you put him?" "Well, it'll last us for the first month if we're frugal, and then I'll figure something out." Jana stared at her interlocutor in astonishment. "It seems to me you should have thought about that earlier," she said reproachfully. "So there's no one to call and no one to turn to. Am I understanding correctly?" "Yes," Zoya nodded, and tears began to well up in her eyes. "Don't be upset, you can't. It'll spoil the milk and you won't be able to feed the baby," Jana said, stroking her hand and smiling encouragingly. "After all, I'm responsible for my little sister." At that moment, a nurse's head peeked out from the door. "Panfilova, there you are. The babies have been brought for feeding, and you're just lounging around. What kind of mothers these days?" "Oh," Zoya jumped up. "I'm off." "Yes, of course," Jana nodded. "So, what are we going to do?" Volodya inquired, when their charge disappeared into the maternity ward. He asked this question perfunctorily, as he roughly knew what his wife would say. "We're staying here until Zoya is discharged," she replied unequivocally. "I figured that. And then?" "Then we'll go back home with her." "But what about our vacation? Volodya, what is wrong with you?" His wife looked at him. "How can you think about vacation? We find stray dogs and take them to shelters, and are we going to abandon a woman with a newborn baby?" "Don't worry, God willing. It won't be our last vacation. We need to think about where and how to accommodate Zoya. I suggest that while she's with the baby, she live with us, and then we can discuss further steps together." Volodya thought that, most likely, Zoya was some kind of swindler who would take advantage of Jana's big heart and then run off, or perhaps even leave the baby with them. But he preferred not to voice his thoughts. Jana always said he thought too poorly of people. "What about those owners who abandon their dogs, and you go around to shelters and put up ads for people to take the pets?" he had once retorted to such reproaches from his wife. "There's always a black sheep," she'd shrugged, "but overall, people are good." Volodya certainly didn't share her optimism, but he liked that Jana was so kind and attentive to all defenseless beings. Perhaps, in part, that's why he loved her, and they had been together for almost 20 years. Jana and Volodya had no children. Almost on their second date, when they had just met, Jana looked into the eyes of the young man, as her future husband then was, and said, "I like you, but there's one significant caveat. I can't have children. So, if you're expecting a house full of children's voices, it's best we part ways now." If he were to be completely honest, the young man had joked then, but he had also pondered, is it really worth it? Perhaps he'll find his family happiness with some other girl who will give him children. But after thinking it over, he admitted to himself that he hadn't thought about children at all until that moment. Everyone has them, so he would too, and if not, we'll adopt someone. Besides, what was Jana saying? Maybe she was testing him. A thought crossed his mind. Moreover, he couldn't imagine anyone in his beloved girl's place as his wife. It was only next to Jana that he wanted to wake up every morning. The young man didn't dwell on her confession and soon proposed. This became an unspoken confirmation that he had understood everything and was choosing her nonetheless. The question was never raised again in the family. There were difficult periods when all their friends' children were born one after another, and visiting them, Volodya would see Jana fussing over the babies, and he himself would sometimes feel a pang in his heart from tenderness towards milk-scented infants. But then their friends' children grew up. Their parents went through a lot with them. Adolescent maximalism, their daughters' wrong choices of boyfriends, and hobbies detrimental to health and psyche. All this happened before the childless couple's eyes. Volodya didn't know how his wife reacted, but he himself had thought more than once or twice that he was grateful to fate that this fate had bypassed them. However, although they didn't talk about it, they had learned to understand each other without words. So Jana and Volodya remained together, and it wouldn't be accurate to say they regretted it much. They cared for each other with the same tenderness and love as 20 years ago, shared their hobbies and good moods, built careers, and calmly went on vacation whenever and wherever they pleased, without looking back at the school year or holiday schedules. Jana cared for stray animals. Volodya understood that she was channeling her untapped maternal love in this way and concluded that it wasn't the worst option. For the remaining 2 days, Jana organized everything for Zoya's discharge, and now they sat in the waiting room, expecting their charge to come out. "Who's here for Panfilova?" A nurse emerged from the maternity ward doors. The greeters exchanged glances and remained silent. "What, no one?" the medic asked, surprised, and went back inside. About 10 minutes later, she came out again. "Who is meeting Panfilova? Zoya Vasilyevna." Again, no one claimed kinship. Just as the nurse was about to leave, it dawned on Jana. "Wait, that's our Zoya!" She grabbed her husband's hand and shouted after the girl. "We're here." She turned, sized them up, and said sternly, "Why are you silent? How long should I run around and ask? Did you bring the blanket?" "Yes, it's all here." Jana handed over a bulky package with a baby blanket, diapers, and other necessary items. "Excuse me, we were distracted." The girl in the white coat, without a word of excuse from the woman, took the items and carried them into the ward. Soon Zoya emerged from there, in her usual headwear. The same nurse carried the baby. "Here you go, Papa." She handed the bundle to Volodya. "Congratulations on your son." The man blushed deeply under his wife's laughing gaze, Zoya's embarrassed one, and muttering thanks, awkwardly took the baby in his arms. "Well, look at that, Papa," Jana teased her husband as they drove home. "What did they think? That you have a very young wife? And you're an old man, Cotter?" "It's not true. Volodya isn't that old," Zoya replied. "My neighbor in the ward is 20 years younger than her husband. He was mistaken for a grandfather. So you're lucky," the woman chuckled. "You still look young, dear. You should be happy they didn't call you Grandpa." Before going to pick up Zoya at the hospital, the couple checked out of the hotel, loaded their belongings into the trunk, and decided that as soon as they picked up the mother and baby, they would drive straight back home. In about 3 hours, if there were no traffic jams, they should arrive. The baby, Jana hoped, would sleep the whole way. After arriving and settling their charge, they could unload the car. A trip to the sea was unlikely in the near future. As Volodya drove, Jana told Zoya about their home, how pleasant it was to walk in the quiet among the trees. The fresh air would promote sound sleep and rapid growth for the baby. The girl listened, smiled, and nodded in agreement, then fell asleep. The new acquaintances showed them to a guest room on the first floor of their country house. That way, she wouldn't have to run to the kitchen up the stairs when she needed to sterilize bottles or pour milk. Jana and Volodya had a bedroom upstairs and an apartment in the city, where they would stay if they had to work late. But mostly, the husband and wife lived in the countryside. Zoya was astonished by the hospitality she received. She felt constrained and constantly worried that the baby's crying was disturbing the couple's sleep or activities. Jana helped the young woman settle in and unobtrusively asked about her life. Why was she alone? Where had she lived before? And what were her future plans? Zoya found the last question easiest to answer. She shared her dreams. "Once Nikita is a little older, I can go to work." "And where will you put him?" the woman asked, surprised. "Where else?" "With me, of course. He'll lie in his stroller while I work. I'll run over to feed him, and then he'll sleep again while I'm at the counter." "No, you can't take a child to work. He'll catch all sorts of germs, and he'll disturb others." "No, he won't. Even little ones understand. Don't worry, Jana. I'm not going to be a burden to you." "It's not a burden for us yet. Can you answer a personal question for me?" Zoya blushed slightly under the woman's attentive gaze, averted her eyes, and nodded. "Tell me, why do you always wear a headscarf? Aren't you cold?" "No, I'm just used to it. It's like clothing. I can't go without a dress, and I can't go without a headscarf either." "Well, I can, but it's not allowed where I'm from." "Where?" "Where you're from." "Well, in our village." Jana marveled at how naive Zoya's ideas about life were. Perhaps where she had lived before and didn't want to return to, it was possible to bring a child to work and stand at the counter while he slept in a stroller in the sun near the entrance of the village store. The woman had no doubt that this fantasy had not just popped into the girl's head. She must have known such examples, but in a big city, this was impossible. And where would Zoya live? It was unlikely that a shop assistant's salary would allow her to rent an apartment. Jana shared her concerns with her husband. "Maybe we could find her some remote work," she suggested, but Volodya immediately dismissed the idea. Zoya didn't know how to approach a computer or even turn it on, let alone work at one. Finally, they both concluded that they needed to have a serious talk with the girl and develop a plan of action. Perhaps move her into an apartment when the child grew older, hire a nanny at their own expense, and send Zoya to study. They just needed to figure out what she could do and what her heart desired. "I can embroider," the girl shrugged in response. "I sing well. Zoya, but something more practical. Jana looked at her. I can look after a house, clean, wash, polish, and cook. Volodya nodded, realizing that nothing else would be achieved. But at least Zoya could be placed somewhere as a housekeeper in the very village where they now lived. That would be good, if only someone here needed a household helper. And if not, the girl suddenly shook her head. I'm a bad cook. My husband didn't like it. Husband? The surprised wife and husband echoed in unison. In all the time they had known her, this was the first memory of relatives they had heard. Zoya realized she had let slip and sighed heavily. I suppose I should tell you everything. The girl got up, looked at her son, who was quietly dozing in his crib, and went into the hall. Jana and Volodya followed her. When Zoya's parents and younger brothers perished in a fire, the 12-year-old girl was saved only because her duties included taking the cow to pasture early in the morning, before dawn, and going to help at the church. The old priest did not like his helpers to arrive later than 5 in the morning. That day, throwing a headscarf over her shoulders, Zoya drove Marusha away with a switch towards the village herd, and greeting the shepherd, Grandpa Pavel ran towards the Old Believer church that towered over the village. The local residents would wake up to the ringing of its bells and fall asleep with the onset of darkness. There was no electricity in the huts, and a telephone was only in the priest's house. At the authorities' insistence, a Feldscher midwife station was set up in the village. All accounting at the store was kept in a ledger and signed by the priest. Married women usually worked at the village store, taking turns with their children. The older ones looked after the little ones, and if there were no older ones, the stroller was placed near the entrance, and villagers passing by would invariably stop and keep an eye on the child. The villagers knew whose shift it was by the children near the store. Today, one could ask Nura for credit, while Glasha, on the contrary, strictly pursued debtors and refused to sell them anything. Unlike the village store, the Old Believers rarely visited the Feldscher, and why, if they passed down knowledge of medicinal herbs and methods of combating diseases from generation to generation. However, the Feldscher themselves did not stay in the village for long. The lifestyle of the villagers was too unfamiliar and regulated. Often, outsiders, without knowing it themselves, violated some rules, and life became unbearable for them. Zoya could no longer remember how many medics had changed in her native village. When the girl ran to the church, its bells rang with all their might, and it was not an unusual morning sound, but an anxious voice. Zoya knew how to recognize it. Another fire somewhere, she thought, and sped up even faster. Zoya is alive, thank God. The priest met her on the church porch. And where are your parents at home? The girl asked, surprised by the question. She came here alone every morning. From the old man's gaze, she suddenly understood that disaster had struck her home, and she rushed back at full speed. Villagers were also converging there, some with buckets, some with pitchforks. Even from around the bend, Zoya saw that the roof of her parents' hut was engulfed in flames. "No!" she cried, tore the headscarf from her neck, and rushed towards the fence. Strong hands held her back. "Hold on! There's nothing for you to do there. You can't help them anymore." Her neighbor, Uncle Nikolai, held the girl tightly as she tried to break free. He watched her house burn. Zoya watched too. She thought with horror of her parents and 2 younger brothers, whom she had left behind when she went out. "Please, let them have woken up and run out. Let them have been saved," the girl pleaded. But her prayers were not heard. No one understood what had happened. The weather was too warm to light the stove. There was no electricity in the house, so a short circuit could not have occurred. Her father did not smoke. There was no way for a stray spark to ignite. However, the fact remained. At 12 years old, Zoya was an orphan. At first, she lived at the church. She was given a small, windowless room that had once served as a pantry. The local men built her a cot and threw a mattress on it. The women brought some bedding and clothes. Everyone felt sorry for the little girl. Zoya ate meals with all the church staff, attended services, and sang in the church choir. On Sundays, she studied in school with the other children, and only occasionally at the evening milking, with the priest's permission, the girl would go to her neighbor Uncle Kolya to hug her cow, Marusha, the only thing left from her family's possessions. Uncle Kolya's family was the smallest in the village. He, his wife Aunt Shura, and their son Prokhor, who was 2 years older than Zoya. Prokhor, as he was called at home. Old believers generally had large families, but after the birth of their first child, something went wrong with Aunt Shura's body, and she could not conceive again. And Prokhor himself was born with difficulty, under the priest's prayers, and with the help of the local midwife. Now the 14-year-old lanky boy was learning the basics of his father's logging business and spent his days at the sawmill with Uncle Kolya, while Aunt Shura managed the household. It was she who once suggested to her husband that they take Zoya in. How long will the orphan live at the church as a dependent? Let's take her in. We are neighbors, after all, and I'll have help around the house. You two men are healthy and strong and capable of hard work, but I'm not young enough to keep up with you anymore. And so, Zoya found herself living next to the charred remains of her own hut. Aunt Shura slowly but surely burdened the girl with household chores. At first, it was the same as on her parents' farm, taking the cow out and going to church. After some time, the woman said, "Enough running to church like a child. You're almost of marriageable age, and you don't know how to do anything. So, dear, after the cow, come home and we'll go to church once a week on Sundays as a family, like all normal people." Zoya didn't dare to object, although she loved singing in the church choir. She often asked the priest herself to attend services so that with her thin but strong voice, she could sing the words addressed to God. The priest also liked how the girl tried and how she led the melody. He always thanked her and was even thinking of keeping the orphan at the church. However, Shura and Nikolai insisted on taking the child to their home. From then on, the girl had other chores. She helped clean the hut and pantries and took care of the piglets and rabbits. Aunt Shura taught the girl to embroider and knit, and they often sat together by candlelight, knitting winter clothes while humming sad village songs. Zoya loved these evenings and enjoyed needlework, but most of all, she wanted to learn to cook. The kitchen seemed like magic to her, all those pots, ladles, boiling broth, and dough rising in a basin. However, Aunt Shura did not let the girl near the kitchen. "You're too young. You'll spoil the dish. Go peel potatoes instead." So Zoya's participation in preparing dinners and lunches for the whole family was limited to peeling vegetables, chopping herbs, and sifting flour. On weekends, Uncle Kolya, after coming from church, would sit at the table in his festive shirt, watching Aunt Shura serve him. For the first course, rich borscht. For the second, roast with delicacies and pie with compote at the end. The man ate with pleasure and praised her. "Oh, my wife has golden hands. Everything she touches turns out delicious and beautiful. Learn, Zoyka. If you can do this, there will be a line of suitors waiting for you." Whether there was a line or not, Zoya never found out, because as soon as Prokhor turned 18, she was betrothed to him. It happened very ordinarily. Villagers gathered around the festive table, congratulating the birthday boy, and most importantly, his parents on their grown child. Now he could get married himself and have children. "Well, Shura, are you going to let your little bird fly from the nest?" someone grunted, having had a drink for the occasion. "And why wouldn't I let such a handsome boy go?" The mother laughed with a low, husky voice. "We already have a bride. Who is it?" "Well, she's sitting here at the table." Shura nodded towards Zoya. "She grew up in our arms, Nikolai's and mine. We practically raised her, so she already knows a lot, and I'll teach her what she doesn't know yet." "Then Godspeed." The guests nodded, agreeing with Prokhor's parents' choice. From about the time Zoya was appointed as the bride, Aunt Shura gradually began to initiate the girl into the secrets of the kitchen. "Zoyka, go stir the bean soup and taste it. Is everything sufficient?" the woman would say, while carefully watching her future daughter-in-law. "Stop, what are you doing? I told you we use this wooden spoon for that." Immediately, a remark would follow, just as Zoya was about to do something that Aunt Shura disapproved of. "What kind of a sieve-like head do you have?" Shura, as an exemplary hostess, had a specific utensil for every dish. She even sifted flour for dumplings and pies through different sieves. Zoya was so anxious about doing things correctly that all her future mother-in-law's instructions flew out of her head. And what kind of a clumsy person are you? What will you feed my Prochor when you marry him? Have I chosen poorly for him?" Shura shook her head, displeased with her future daughter-in-law. After the wedding, the young couple was given a room in the parents' house, and only there could Zoya be alone and rest. This rarely happened, as the daughter-in-law obeyed Aunt Shura in everything and spent her days managing the household. The girl found out about her pregnancy too late. When, lifting a heavy cast-iron pot of potatoes onto the table, she suddenly felt a sharp pain somewhere in her lower abdomen, bent over and fell to the floor, and a pool of blood began to spread under her light, long skirt. Shura immediately understood what had happened and pushed the men out of the hut. Then she helped her daughter-in-law clean up, gave her a pain-relieving decoction to drink, after which they washed the floor together and invited the men back for dinner. The mother strictly forbade Prochor from approaching his young wife for the next couple of weeks. "And you scream if anything happens. I can hear you and will come and sort him out." She looked at her daughter-in-law, shaking her fist towards her son. After that incident, all of her husband's tenderness disappeared. As soon as it was allowed, he would come home from work, have dinner, and take Zoya to the room without asking her. The parents-in-law watched their children's relationship calmly. It had always been the custom in their village. People get married to have children, and how would they come about if the wife started being capricious? The husband decided that if it was necessary, then obey him. 3 years after Prochor's wedding, the men of the village built a new hut for them and their future children on the site of the old burnt-down house. The plot was assigned to the girl, but since Prochor was her husband, now both the land, the hut, and the wife belonged to him before God and people. After Zoya moved into their own house, life became easier than with her in-laws. She could manage the household as she pleased, use any spoon she wanted to stir the soup, and wash the floor when it was convenient, not when her mother-in-law said so. But she still had to visit her husband's parents and help her mother-in-law. And there, reproaches began to pour in, that after that incident, Zoya still hadn't gotten pregnant. "I look at you, Mother, and I think, didn't we marry our son to a barren flower?" Nikolai would ask his wife, as if incidentally. "She looks after the house, of course. Prochor is happy and well-groomed. He's even become more mature. The daughter-in-law seems to manage the household well, too. But where are the children, Zoyka? Where are the children, I ask? Or is Prochor slacking off? Just say the word, and I'll set him straight in a jiffy." "No, everything is fine with us." The girl shyly lowered her eyes. "There will definitely be children, right, Prosha?" "Of course, Father, don't doubt it," Zoya's husband chimed in, nodding in agreement with his father. After getting married, Zoya was accepted into a group of young women like herself who had already become wives, and some even mothers. Now she had someone to talk to besides her mother-in-law. The girls shared advice on how to treat children's colds, which mushrooms were best for soup and which were good for frying, and other wisdoms of family life. They often gathered together and embroidered, knitted, and wove. Then Nura, the bolder one among them, would address Zoya. "Sing for us, beauty." And the girl would sing a melody with her voice, and the others would join in. Often the craftswomen would exchange their embroidery, napkins, and even rugs. Zoya didn't have friends before, but now she gladly participated in their gatherings. Together, they would walk 3 kilometers to the sawmill where their husbands worked. The friends carried heavy bags filled with pots and pans wrapped in several layers so that their husbands would have a hot lunch. On the way, they would tell each other stories about their children and parents, sing and share recipes. "You know, Zoyka, I tried making dough using your recipe, and it turned out so light and airy that even Senya was surprised at how well my pie turned out today," said one of the companions. The other girls immediately nodded. "Everything you make is very delicious. My husband also said that from now on I should only make roast like this for him, and my twins don't recognize any other compote anymore, only yours. My mother gets angry when we visit. They are still little, and they say that Mom's cooking is tastier." "The truth comes from the mouths of babes. Where did you learn to cook so well?" "Aunt Shura helped," the girl replied modestly. "Oh no, I don't believe it at all." Nura shook her head. "Your mother-in-law's cooking is delicious, I don't deny it, but it's somehow very heavy, as if she even adds lard to the broth. A peal of girlish laughter echoed through the forest. There was no one else to teach me. Zoya shrugged. I come up with things myself, improving her recipes. If I like it myself, I share it with you. Then you have a talent. We should tell the priest. Maybe he'll hire you as a cook at the church. Will you go? Suggested the priest's niece. No. Zoya shook her head. Prokhor is against me working. He says if I work, I won't be able to have children for him. And that's true, anything can happen. Aunt Shura worked like a horse, and she only managed to give birth to your husband. The friends nodded. Just don't delay with it. It's better to have more children while you're young, so they can take care of you in old age. Look at Prokhor's mother now. She's probably sitting with her hands folded, and you're doing all the work for her. Oh, no, the girl objected. I'm just helping her. When you have children and raise them, they'll clean the house and cook for you, too. Yes, but have more girls, Nura grumbled. You won't get any help from the men. From them, no, but their wives, another immediately retorted. Wives like Zoya are rare. You probably help your parents, don't you? The interlocutor parried. Both mine and my in-laws, but less so for them, of course. So have girls, Zoya, they are more useful, Nura concluded. I'll try, Zoya smiled, looking down at the ground, thinking that she wouldn't mind if she and Prosha had a baby. She had even thought of a name for her son, Nikita. Oh, girls, do you know where our feldsher ran off to? One of the girls changed the subject. A couple of weeks ago, the medic from the first aid station closed it and her hut, hung a sign that it was closed until the arrival of a new feldsher, and disappeared. Where? The others immediately became interested. But I'm not telling you this. A friend whispered it to me. She's not from here. Imagine. She found herself a lover. A lover? Where? She seemed to be married. She always said, my Seryozha this, my Seryozha that. Well, she went to divorce her Seryozha. She'll live with her lover now. You don't say? The friends covered their mouths with their hands. That's against God. What does she care? She's not one of us. The gossiper waved her hand. And the most important thing, do you know who her lover is? The girl paused and blurted out, taxi driver Fyodor, who sometimes comes to us. The one from Mikhailovka, right? The very same. They say he once took her for medicine, and on the way back, he dragged her into the woods. Well, you know. She started living with him instead of her husband. He found out, came to Mikhailovka to sort things out. The local men barely separated them, and she stood aside and laughed. Whoever wins, she said, I'll stay with him, and whoever loses, I'll help and let him go his own way. Her husband immediately stopped fighting and said he was divorcing her. And I think it wasn't Fyodor who dragged her there. She dragged him. Nura chuckled. She probably missed attention, so she found someone closer. What's the difference? They are all godless there. It's no wonder the priest says at every service that family must be cherished. Otherwise, you send your wife to work in the village. It would seem, what danger could she face here? Our men won't look at her, a married woman and a non-believer. But no, she still found someone to cheat with. A girl needs to cherish her family from a young age. The friends walked on in silence, pondering what they had heard. No matter how much her friends praised Zoya's cooking, Prokhor was always displeased. In his opinion, cheese should be cut into thick pieces, because thin slices don't have enough flavor. Mushroom soup should be cooked in meat broth, and pie should be made with bacon or fish, not berries. It wasn't filling at all. I don't understand, Zoika. How many years have you lived in our house? Surely my mother didn't teach you to cook. Or are you so clueless that you can't even repeat it? He grumbled when he came home and his wife served him dinner. Zoya nodded silently, thinking that everyone except Prokhor liked her food. And most importantly, she liked to cook. But for some reason, her husband said everything was not tasty. Anura prepared such a pie following my recipe, when one girl tried to object, saying that the whole family ate it with great enjoyment. Well, Nurka is a notorious fibber. She'll tell you all sorts of things. Prokhor chuckled, burped, wiped his mouth with a towel, and taking his wife by the hand, led her into the room. That day, Zoya was a bit late preparing the bean soup, so her friends left without her. The girl had forgotten to soak the beans the night before, and she had to sort through the ones that had already softened, separating them from the hard ones. Then she had to cook them for a longer time. And although Zoya tried to follow her mother-in-law's recipe precisely, she decided against adding lard, believing the soup was hearty enough as it was. Quickly wrapping the pot in a blanket and placing it in her bag, the girl set off through the woods to catch up with her companions. However, she didn't make it in time and arrived at the sawmill when the other men were already seated at the table. "Where on earth have you been?" Prochor scowled at her. "Doesn't it matter that your husband is hungry here? Here, I brought you everything," Zoya exhaled, thrusting the bag in front of him. "I'll serve it now." The man was in a bad mood because he had received a reprimand from the foreman, and on whom else could he vent his anger if not on his own wife? Scooping a spoonful of stew and bringing it to his mouth, Prochor winced. "What have you brought this time? What kind of slop is this? They serve better gruel in prison." "And have you been to prison?" one of his colleagues asked with a laugh. However, Procha shot him such a glare that the man preferred to keep quiet. "What a wife I've gotten," the man declared loudly for the entire sawmill to hear. "She doesn't bear children, she doesn't know how to cook. She should at least learn from my mother. Everything she makes is always delicious." With these words, Prochor rose from the table and poured his full plate into the bowl of the guard dog, which began to eat with relish. "It's only your slop that dogs would appreciate." The colleagues and their wives stared at the man's behavior in stunned silence. Zoya, swallowing the lump in her throat, looked at her husband, then lowered her eyes and said, "I'm sorry, I tried." "You tried poorly," he snapped, throwing the plate to the ground and walking away. Zoya returned home alone as well. She had told her friends to leave without her, but instead she went into the woods, cried her heart out, and then carried her bag home. "There's Felsharitsa, she's a real go-getter." A thought struck her. She wanted a lover, so she got one. She wanted to divorce her husband, so she did. Am I supposed to endure him my entire life? And the girl felt such bitterness in her soul that she decided, no, I'll get a divorce too. I don't care if everyone condemns me. I'll move to the city and get a divorce and let his mother feed him. Zoya marched home, full of determination to carry out her plan. While the girl was contemplating divorcing her husband, she suddenly realized she was pregnant again. Her mother-in-law, whom she approached with the question, confirmed her suspicion. "Listen, Nikolai, it seems you and I will finally get to see our grandchildren," Shura said to her husband that evening. "Now go to the young couple and set Procha on the right path. Tell him that his mother wants an heir, and she's had enough of carrying lunches to the sawmill. He's a healthy man. He can survive on sandwiches and tea." For the first while after her husband learned of Zoya's pregnancy, her life became a little easier. She no longer had to listen to constant reproaches about her inability to cook or manage the household, and in their room, the man began to treat her differently, perhaps a bit more gently. Soon the girl's belly became noticeable to everyone. Prochor could no longer approach Zoya, which drove him mad, and he began to vent his anger on his wife again. Zoya cried in solitude, dreading how she would raise her child and what kind of person he would become if he witnessed Prochor's treatment of her. After another argument, when her husband left for work, Zoya sat on the bed and pondered. A plan, not yet entirely clear, began to form in her mind. "And where did the bicycle come from?" Volodya asked. It was the first thing that came to mind after a brief silence, when he and Jana had listened to the girl's story. "Yes," Zoya waved her hand. "That's from Felsharitsa. She left it by the post. It was standing there, not needed by anyone. I had already packed my bag, and when I felt like it was starting, I grabbed it, walked to the bicycle, and took it." "How could she leave it? And it was just standing there?" Jana exclaimed in amazement. "Even the boys didn't take it to ride. Oh no, all our children are disciplined. They wouldn't take what isn't theirs." "Nini, but I'm not going back there. I just want to divorce Prochor. I can't anymore. Do you know how to do it?" "I see why she always wears a kerchief," Jana thought, and asked the girl in response. "And did you bring the documents? Your marriage certificate?" "I have everything in my bag," Zoya nodded. She took out an old, heavily worn cardboard folder from her cloth bag and handed it to Jana. The woman and her husband carefully examined its contents and found only a handwritten note signed by the local priest stating that Prokhor and Zoya were now husband and wife before God and man. "No, this isn't it." Volodya shook his head. "You don't have a state certificate?" "No," the girl shrugged. "Our whole village uses these." "I understand. Then it's even simpler," Jana smiled at her protégé. "You can't get a divorce because, legally speaking, you are not married and owe nothing to your Prokhor." "How so?" "Prokhor is my husband. I have a son with him." Zoya didn't understand, and Volodya and his wife began to explain the situation to her in unison. When the girl grasped everything, she became bewildered and asked, "What should I do now?" Her plan's main objective was to divorce her husband, just as the Fel Sharitza, who had left, had done. But she hadn't even thought about what would come next. In village life, everything was clear to her. She had to work at Silpo, go to church, and attend to community affairs. But here, among strangers, horror washed over the girl. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Would I have to go back? Prokhor will beat me for running away." "This is what we wanted to discuss," Volodya said as calmly as possible, "which is why we asked what you can do and what you enjoy doing. As they say, let's return to our sheep." "What?" Zoya didn't understand, although the calm tone of her interlocutor somewhat soothed her. "Don't mind," Jana said, getting up from her chair. "It's a saying. The saying goes that before you told us about your life, we asked, 'What do you want to do?' I propose not to rush Zoya with an answer for now," she turned to her husband. "Let her live here, think, and then we'll decide. For example, when Nikita turns 5 months old." However, they didn't have to wait that long. Arriving from the city once more, the married couple entered the house and gasped. Everything around sparkled and shone with cleanliness. Zoya came out with her son in her arms to greet the hosts. "Did you clean this much?" Jana exclaimed admiringly. "No cleaner we've ever hired could achieve such beauty. Right, Volodya? It was already clean here," the girl said, embarrassed by the praise. "And I found so many different cleaning agents for the floor, dishes, and even glass. Nikita sleeps most of the day, so I decided to clean. Then you called and said you'd be here in the evening. I prepared dinner." When the girl set the prepared dishes on the laid table, Volodya and his wife exchanged glances and nodded at each other. They understood what Zoya should do in the near future. A man and 2 women entered the glass doors of a fashionable resort restaurant with a child about 2 or 3 years old. "Excuse me, my wife and I are celebrating our wedding anniversary today, 22 years. Volodya addressed the hostess. "The date isn't round, but the number is beautiful. We wanted to inquire if it's possible to have our cake presented beautifully after dinner." "I understand that's against the rules. I'll ask now." The girl nodded and disappeared behind the kitchen curtain. A few minutes later, the chef approached the guests. "As an exception, it's possible," he nodded. "Where is the treat?" Zoya, handing Nikita over to Jana, shyly took a box out of a large bag and offered it to the man. He didn't take it, but nodded and said, "Come with me." The girl carefully carried the box, following the man. "Everything is provided for here," she said, opening the cake placed on the table. "Even a place for candles, and here are the candles themselves." The girl placed 2 shaped candles with the number 2 next to them. "And I see you've prepared well." The kitchen owner smiled encouragingly. "Where did you order the cake from?" "Somewhere in our city. I made it myself," Zoya said quietly, blushing again. "You made it yourself?" the man exclaimed. "You are a true professional. Your parents are lucky." The girl didn't understand her parents at first. "Oh no, it's my cousin and her husband." "Even luckier," the chef smiled. "Not even close relatives, and you created such beauty for them." "Besides them, the only ones close to me are my son." Zoya countered his words. The man felt awkward and changed the subject. "Did you study somewhere?" "Yes," she nodded. "I graduated from college with a specialization in pastry." "Really?" The chef was genuinely delighted. "And my pastry chef just quit." Wouldn't you want his position? I'm serious. Actually, we're here on vacation. The girl was flustered, but seeing how upset her interlocutor looked, she tried to cheer him up. I'll ask my relatives. Shall I talk to them myself? Jana and Volodya left on vacation alone, leaving their companion with her son in the resort town. Zoya was offered not only a job with a good salary, but also temporary housing until she settled in. You've done so much for me, the girl said, as she said goodbye when it was time for Jana and Volodya to return. But I need to start living independently. That's wonderful, dear. Tears welled up in Jana's eyes. I'm happy for you and honestly, even a little envious. It's warm here all year round and the sea is right nearby. It'll be perfect for Nikita to grow up. I'll send your things. Don't worry. I hope you find yourself and your happiness here. Thank you, Nikita. Wave goodbye. The 2-year-old child raised his hand. Bye-bye. I'll miss you. Volodya crouched down next to him, hugged the boy, and hid his face so that the tears welling up in his eyes wouldn't be visible. Men don't cry after all. They drove back quietly, without music or conversation. Jana looked at the surrounding landscape. Her husband watched the road and the cars around them. Brake. His wife grabbed his hand at one point when they were not far from home. The man pressed the pedal. What happened? Nothing. This is where we met Zoya. Jana nodded towards the embankment behind which stretched a field with small woods on the opposite side. Volodya carefully turned onto the shoulder, parked, and got out of the car. Together they descended to the spot from where, over 2 years ago, they had helped a pregnant Zoya get into the car. And the bicycle is gone, the wife said sadly. What are you talking about? He laughed. Did you expect to find it here? Just say the word, and I'll buy you a new one. I'll buy it myself, Jana smiled. Did we know at that moment that this stop on the roadside would bring so much happiness and smiles into our lives? And sleepless nights, worries, and anxieties, Volodya continued. And yet, it's a pity this story is over. The woman sighed and began to climb the embankment towards the car. But another one is beginning. Volodya winked at her and followed. I hope it will be happy for Zoya and Nikita. And imagine, for the first time in my life, I can't come up with a single aphorism about it. Jana stood by the car and laughed. Thus passes worldly glory. I think it's time for you to invent your own. Well, the man mused, sometimes the side of the road can be the beginning of a new path. Bravo! His wife clapped her hands. And now let's go home, my wise man. The SUV, purring smoothly, pulled onto the highway and began to move away from the stopping point.